What if the God you think you know, the one you've been taught about since childhood, has a history far more ancient, complex, and surprising than you ever imagined? What if Yahweh's true origins challenge everything you thought you understood about monotheism? This isn't just an academic exercise, it's about reclaiming your spiritual power. Understanding the evolution of Yahweh isn't about disproving faith, it's about empowering yourself to question dogma, connect with the divine on your own terms, and see how religious narratives have shaped not just our beliefs, but entire civilizations. Today, billions recognize Yahweh as the singular God of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet this seemingly monolithic figure began as something quite different, a tribal warrior storm god of a small group of ancient Israelites. Our journey will trace the fascinating transformation of this deity, revealing how Canaanite religious traditions and other Near Eastern influences molded Yahweh into the God we know today. This is not an isolated case. Religious evolution is a constant process, with faiths frequently absorbing and repurposing elements from earlier traditions. Think about how Christianity integrated aspects of Roman paganism, transforming holidays and deities to fit its narrative. The story of Yahweh is no different. It's a story of cultural exchange, adaptation, and the enduring power of belief. To truly understand Yahweh's transformation, we must journey back to the ancient Near East, a region teeming with diverse cultures, constant migrations, and frequent conflicts. This melting pot of civilizations served as the crucible in which Israelite religion, and thus Yahweh, took shape. The Babylonian exile, for example, stands as a pivotal event that profoundly impacted Israelite theology, potentially shaping their understanding of Yahweh's power and their relationship with Him. But understanding Yahweh's origins is more than an intellectual pursuit. It's a deeply personal journey that can empower you to critically examine your own beliefs, fostering a more authentic and meaningful connection with the divine. By understanding the history, you can begin to dismantle rigid dogmas and explore spirituality on your own terms. Furthermore, understanding the evolution of Yahweh sheds light on the very nature of religious belief itself. Religious narratives, like the one surrounding Yahweh, have the power to shape societies, forge identities, and even incite conflicts. Consider the concept of the chosen people, a cornerstone of Jewish identity that has resonated through millennia, influencing both triumphs and tragedies. By examining how Yahweh's story has been crafted and reinterpreted, we can gain profound insights into the human condition and the enduring quest for meaning. Prepare to question conventional understandings of monotheism and religious authority. We will explore how Yahweh's attributes are not necessarily unique, but rather reflect universal human experiences and archetypes that have been projected onto the divine. Be prepared to confront the uncomfortable truth of cultural appropriation, as we explore how older pagan traditions were absorbed and repurposed into monotheistic religions, including the worship of Yahweh. Before Yahweh became the sole God, the early Israelites were a tribal people with a religious system that was either polytheistic, worshipping multiple gods, or henotheistic, acknowledging many gods, but primarily worshipping one. El, for example, was a prominent deity in early Israelite religion, often considered the head of the Canaanite pantheon. Within this context, the figure of a warrior storm god was a common archetype throughout the ancient Near East. Baal, the Canaanite storm god, wielded power over rain, thunder, and fertility, playing a vital role in the agricultural cycle and the well-being of the people. These deities were not gentle or passive. They were forces of nature, capable of both creation and destruction. As we delve into the origins of Yahweh, we will examine key biblical texts, such as the Song of Deborah in the Book of Judges, which vividly portrays Yahweh as a fierce warrior leading his people to victory. We will also explore archaeological evidence that sheds light on the religious practices of the early Israelites, challenging traditional interpretations and revealing the complex interplay of cultural influences. This will involve recognizing patterns within ancient religious beliefs and how they have similarities with Yahweh. So who was Yahweh before he became the God of the Israelites, and how did a tribal deity evolve into a universal God? The true origins of Yahweh are shrouded in the mists of history and mythology, obscured by layers of interpretation and cultural biases. Yet, by piecing together the available evidence, we can begin to reconstruct a more complete and nuanced picture of this enigmatic deity. The evolution of Yahweh is not an isolated incident, but rather part of a larger pattern of religious syncretism and cultural exchange that has shaped the course of human history. And later, we will explore esoteric interpretations of Yahweh and practical spiritual exercises for self-discovery, offering not only historical knowledge, but also insights into personal spiritual growth. Was Yahweh originally a Canaanite deity who was adopted by the Israelites? The answer, as we will discover, is far more intricate and fascinating than you might imagine, so stay with us. So, who was Yahweh before he became the God of the Israelites, and how did a tribal deity evolve into a universal God? Let's delve into Yahweh's earliest origins, stripping away the layers of later interpretations to uncover the raw, unfiltered image of a tribal warrior god. Forget the gentle shepherd or the compassionate father figure for a moment. The earliest mentions of Yahweh paint a very different picture, one of a fierce deity intimately connected with storms, natural disasters, and the brutal realities of ancient warfare. Have you ever wondered why the Old Testament God seems so different from the New Testament God? The answer lies in this transformation, from a tribal protector to a universal moral authority. Consider the Song of Deborah in the Book of Judges. This isn't a hymn to a loving creator, it's a war cry. Yahweh is depicted as a powerful force of nature, shaking the earth and routing Israel's enemies. Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the region of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens dropped, the clouds also dropped water. This is not the language of peace and love. It's the language of divine power unleashed in battle. This violent imagery reflects the socio-political context of the early Israelites, a tribal society constantly engaged in warfare for survival and dominance. Their perception of Yahweh was inextricably linked to their need for military success. A God who could deliver victory was a God worth worshipping, a God whose authority was directly proportional to his demonstrated power on the battlefield. The Israelites' early belief in Yahweh was intertwined with their very existence as a people, their hopes for survival resting on his martial prowess. This archetype of the divine warrior was not unique to the Israelites. Throughout the ancient Near East, warrior gods were common, reflecting the turbulent times and the constant struggle for power. Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, famously battled the primordial sea monster Tiamat in the Enuma Elish, establishing order through violence and becoming the supreme deity. Ashur, the patron god of the Assyrian Empire, was a fierce warrior who led armies to victory and ensured the empire's dominance. Drawing parallels between Yahweh and these other Near Eastern warrior gods reveals a pattern. Divine power was often associated with military might and the ability to conquer enemies. Yahweh's initial appeal to the Israelites lay in his promise of victory, his ability to protect them from their foes. He was their divine champion, their protector in a dangerous world, and his warlike attributes were not a contradiction, but a confirmation of his power. Initially, Yahweh's characteristics as a warrior god served the specific needs of the early Israelites. He was a guarantor of victory, a symbol of their tribal identity, and a source of hope in a world of constant conflict. His promise to deliver them from their enemies reinforced his authority and cemented his position as their primary deity. This promise wasn't just spiritual, it was tangible, measured in conquered territories, defeated armies, and the survival of their people. This direct correlation between Yahweh's power and the Israelites' success created a feedback loop, reinforcing their belief and strengthening his position. But as the Israelites transitioned from a nomadic, tribal society to a more settled, agrarian one, their relationship with Yahweh began to evolve, influenced by the religious landscape of Canaan, where they settled. The promise of protection wasn't enough for prosperity. As the Israelites settled in Canaan, they encountered a rich and complex religious landscape, populated by a pantheon of gods and goddesses who were deeply intertwined with the land, its fertility, and its cycles of life. This interaction led to a period of religious syncretism, the blending of different religious beliefs and practices. Religious syncretism is a common phenomenon in history. When cultures meet, their beliefs inevitably influence each other, leading to new religious expressions. Consider how Roman paganism influenced the development of Christianity, or how Buddhism adapted to local traditions as it spread across Asia. This is how religions survive and evolve. They transform, incorporating new ideas and practices to remain relevant and appealing to new audiences. The major Canaanite deities included Baal, the storm god and fertility deity, Asherah, the goddess of fertility and motherhood, and El, the chief god of the Canaanite pantheon. Baal was particularly important, as he controlled the rain, thunder, and lightning that were essential for agriculture. Asherah was associated with fertility, procreation, and the abundance of the land. El was seen as the wise and benevolent father of the gods. These deities were not distant or abstract. They were intimately involved in the daily lives of the Canaanites, influencing the weather, the harvest, and the health of their families. Their worship involved elaborate rituals, sacrifices, and festivals that celebrated the cycles of nature and the power of the gods. The early Israelites, surrounded by this vibrant religious culture, could not help but be influenced by it. It was in their nature, as humans, to be influenced by the cultural landscape around them. The similarities between Yahweh and Baal are striking. Both were storm gods, associated with thunder, lightning, and rain. Both were divine warriors, leading their people to victory in battle. Some scholars even believe that Yahweh may have originally been a Canaanite deity who was adopted by the Israelites, a controversial theory that challenges the traditional view of Yahweh as a unique and separate deity. Archaeological evidence suggests that the early Israelites worshipped both Yahweh and Baal, sometimes even using the same temples and altars. This suggests a period of religious blending, where the lines between Yahweh and Baal were blurred. Yahweh's association with thunder and lightning may have been directly influenced by Baal's storm imagery, his warlike attributes mirroring Baal's role as a divine warrior. Did the Israelites simply adopt Baal and rename him Yahweh? The truth is likely more complex. Some pagan traditions were absorbed and repurposed into monotheistic religions. Yahweh's attributes were likely a result of cultural appropriation and consolidation from pre-existing powers. The story of Moses receiving the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai, for example, bears striking similarities to earlier Mesopotamian law codes, such as the Code of Hammurabi. The practice of sacrifice, common in ancient religions, was also adopted by the Israelites as a way to appease Yahweh and seek his favor. Even the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest that housed the Ten Commandments, may have been inspired by similar religious objects in other ancient Near Eastern cultures. This wasn't a conscious act of deception, but a natural process of cultural exchange and adaptation. The Israelites, like any other people, borrowed and adapted elements from the cultures around them, shaping their religion in the process. So, how did the Israelites reconcile this syncretism with their growing belief in one God? And how did Yahweh transform from a tribal warrior into the universal deity we know today? The reconciliation wasn't neat or immediate. It was a messy, centuries-long process of negotiation, adaptation, and reinterpretation. And the key to understanding this process lies in archaeological evidence, or more precisely, what that evidence reveals about the religious practices of the early Israelites. Forget the image of a devoutly monotheistic people, untouched by pagan influences. The reality, uncovered by archaeologists, is far more complex and challenges the traditional narrative. Have you ever wondered why certain biblical stories seem to clash with the idea of a purely monotheistic faith? The answer is in the dirt, in the stones, in the remnants of a past that the Old Testament often tries to erase. Consider Kuntalit Ajrud, an ancient site in the Sinai Peninsula. Here, archaeologists discovered inscriptions that refer to Yahweh and his Asherah. Asherah, as we discussed, was a Canaanite goddess of fertility and motherhood. The implications are staggering. These inscriptions suggest that at least some Israelites, at some point in their history, worshipped Yahweh alongside Asherah. This isn't a minor deviation. It's a direct challenge to the idea that Yahweh was always worshipped as the sole God of Israel. Similar findings have emerged from other archaeological sites, revealing evidence of Canaanite religious practices coexisting with the worship of Yahweh. Sacred groves, fertility rituals, and the veneration of local deities were likely common among the early Israelites, practices that were later condemned by religious reformers who sought to purify the faith. Sukkot, the Jewish harvest festival, may have originated as a Canaanite celebration of the agricultural cycle. The linguistic connections between Yahweh and Canaanite deities offer another piece of the puzzle. The shared use of the title El, a generic term for God, suggests a common religious vocabulary and potentially shared origins. All this destabilizes conventional interpretations of the Old Testament, portraying them as retrospective constructions that actively erased prior pagan influences to promote a single, coherent narrative. But why would the Israelites, or any people, project human attributes onto their gods? The answer lies in the psychology of projection, a concept that suggests humans tend to project their own desires, fears, and values onto divine figures. Think about it. Is it really a coincidence that Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, demands loyalty and obedience, just as a tribal chieftain would? Or that he gets angry when his people stray, mirroring the emotions of a betrayed leader? It's not. The Israelites projected their need for a strong leader onto Yahweh, portraying him as a powerful warrior and king. Yahweh's jealousy, often cited as a unique attribute, can be interpreted as a projection of the Israelites' fear of losing their exclusive relationship with their God, mirroring their anxieties about tribal allegiances and external threats. The demand for sacrifices, a common feature of ancient religions, can be seen as a reflection of the human desire to appease powerful figures and secure their favor. Consider Yahweh's attributes through the lens of authoritarian psychology. His demand for absolute obedience mirrors the demands of a strict parent or ruler. His willingness to punish disobedience reinforces the importance of following his commands, and just like an authoritarian figure, Yahweh sets himself as the ultimate authority. By recognizing the role of projection, individuals can develop a more authentic and personal relationship with the divine, detaching it from potentially limiting anthropomorphic qualities. Recognizing that these qualities are human projections and not inherent attributes of the divine can be incredibly liberating. But it was during a period of profound crisis that the concept of Yahweh truly began to transform: the Babylonian exile. The Babylonian exile, beginning in 587 BCE, was a watershed moment in Israelite history. The destruction of the temple in Jerusalem and the deportation of the elite to Babylon led to a crisis of faith and a reevaluation of the relationship between Yahweh and the Israelites. If Yahweh was so powerful, why had he allowed this to happen? Some Israelites interpreted the exile as a punishment for their sins, a consequence of their failure to uphold the covenant with Yahweh. This interpretation led to a renewed emphasis on religious purity and adherence to the law. Other Israelites, however, began to question the very nature of Yahweh. Was he truly the all-powerful God they had always believed him to be? It was during the exile that the Old Testament was codified, the Torah compiled and edited, solidifying its authority as the central text of Judaism and standardizing Israelite religious practices, a critical turning point that cemented a single narrative. Paradoxically, the concept of Yahweh as a universal God emerged during the exile. Living in a foreign land, surrounded by different cultures and religions, the Israelites sought to maintain their identity and their faith. They began to emphasize Yahweh's power over all nations, not just Israel. The prophet Isaiah proclaimed that Yahweh was the God of all the earth, a deity whose reach extended far beyond the borders of Canaan. This was a radical departure from the earlier tribal conception of Yahweh, a transformation driven by the need to maintain faith and identity in a foreign land. The Babylonian exile was a turning point for power consolidation, religious leaders using this narrative to create a shared story and increase control, subtly shifting the focus from a tribal protector to a universal monarch. But with this consolidation came another, potentially dangerous idea, the concept of chosenness. The concept of the chosen people is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided the Israelites with a sense of identity and purpose during times of hardship. On the other hand, it has been used to justify ethnocentrism, exclusion, and violence against other groups. Analyze the biblical passages that describe the Israelites as Yahweh's chosen people. What do they really say? Do they promote a message of love and inclusion, or do they reinforce a sense of superiority and separation? The potential consequences of believing in divine favor are significant. Throughout history, the concept of chosenness has been used to justify discrimination and violence against those deemed unworthy or outsiders. Consider the Crusades, the Holocaust, and other instances of religious conflict. In each case, the belief in divine favor played a role in motivating and justifying acts of violence. It is important to recognize that the concept of chosenness is not unique to Judaism. Similar ideas can be found in other religions, demonstrating a recurring pattern of religious exceptionalism. The Islamic belief that Muslims are the best of peoples, for example, echoes the Jewish concept of chosenness. The question we must ask ourselves is this: would a truly universal God favor one group over others? Does it make sense that a divine being would create billions of people, only to choose a select few for special favor? Perhaps it's time to challenge the notion of divine exclusivity and embrace a more inclusive spiritual perspective, recognizing that all people are equally worthy of love and respect. But to truly understand the complexities of Yahweh, we must delve into the realm of esoteric interpretations. Esoteric traditions, such as Kabbalah and Gnosticism, offer alternative perspectives on Yahweh, moving beyond the literal interpretations of the Old Testament. The Kabbalah views Yahweh as a complex and multifaceted being, represented by the 10 Sephirot, each of which embodies a different aspect of the divine. These esoteric traditions suggest that Yahweh may represent a universal principle or force, such as the I Am, or the source of all existence, rather than a personal God. Consider the Gnostic concept of the monad as the ultimate source of reality and its connection to Yahweh. Could Yahweh be a symbol of the underlying unity of all things, a representation of the divine spark that resides within each of us? By analyzing the symbolism associated with Yahweh's name and attributes, we can uncover hidden meanings and esoteric connections. The Hebrew letters of Yahweh's name, for example, can be interpreted as representing different aspects of the divine, revealing layers of meaning that are not immediately apparent. This opens the door to practical exercises for self-discovery and personal empowerment, suggesting that esoteric practices can help individuals connect with the divine on a deeper level, free from religious dogma, a topic we'll explore further in the next section. The esoteric practices offer a glimpse beyond the literal interpretations, but to truly grasp the transformation of Yahweh, we must examine how his image evolved, shifting from a divine warrior to a lawgiver. The Old Testament isn't a monolithic text. It's a collection of diverse writings spanning centuries, reflecting different historical periods and societal needs. And as the needs of the Israelite society changed, so too did the attributes ascribed to Yahweh. Have you ever considered how the context of the Book of Judges, a time of tribal conflict and military struggle, shapes its depiction of Yahweh? He's portrayed as a fierce warrior, leading his people into battle, a divine commander whose power is manifested through military victories. This is a deity perfectly suited to the needs of a nascent nation fighting for its survival, demanding absolute loyalty and promising victory to those who follow his commands. Contrast this with the portrayal of Yahweh in the book of Deuteronomy, written centuries later, when the Israelites had established a more settled, agricultural society. Here the emphasis shifts from military prowess to moral righteousness. Yahweh is still powerful, but his power is now expressed through the law. He's a lawgiver and judge, concerned with issues of justice, compassion, and ethical conduct. Why this transformation? The shift reflects the changing needs of Israelite society. As they transitioned from nomadic tribes to a settled nation, they required a different kind of God, one who could provide blessings, ensure social order, and promote ethical behavior. The evolution mirrors a society maturing and requiring a more sophisticated system of governance and values. The tribal warrior becomes the sage ruler. But what if this evolution wasn't simply a reflection of societal needs? What if it was also a result of deliberate manipulation by religious leaders seeking to consolidate their power? Consider the role of the priestly class in Jerusalem, particularly after the Babylonian exile. These priests were responsible for maintaining the temple, interpreting the law, and shaping the religious beliefs of the people. By promoting a particular image of Yahweh, one that emphasized obedience, ritual purity, and the authority of the priesthood, they could consolidate their own power and maintain social order. The more fearsome and all-powerful Yahweh was perceived to be, the greater the authority of those who claimed to speak for him. Religious teachings, therefore, become tools for social control, subtly reinforcing existing power structures. Understanding these shifts empowers individuals to critically examine the motivations behind religious teachings, discerning whether they truly reflect divine will or serve more earthly agendas. This raises a further question: what about the feminine aspect of the divine? The ancient Near East was replete with goddesses, powerful figures like Asherah, Ishtar, and Nhat, each embodying different aspects of the feminine principle: fertility, motherhood, wisdom, and strength. Asherah, in particular, was widely worshipped in Canaan, and as archaeological evidence suggests, even in ancient Israel. Have you ever wondered why these goddesses were eventually suppressed, their worship condemned as pagan idolatry? The suppression of the divine feminine represents a profound shift in religious and cultural values, with far-reaching consequences. Explore the biblical passages that explicitly condemn the worship of Asherah and other goddesses. These passages often portray these goddesses as rivals to Yahweh, seductive figures who lead the Israelites astray. Why this fear of the feminine? The demonization of goddesses can be seen as an attempt to consolidate power in the hands of male priests and to establish a patriarchal social order. By suppressing the divine feminine, they could reinforce the idea that men were superior to women and that male authority was divinely ordained. Consider the potential consequences of this suppression: a patriarchal worldview, a devaluation of women, and a disconnection from nature. A society that denies the feminine aspects of the divine risks becoming unbalanced, emphasizing aggression and control over compassion and nurturing. But what if reclaiming the divine feminine could lead to a more balanced and holistic understanding of the divine? What if it could foster a greater appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things? Some scholars and spiritual seekers believe that the reintroduction of the feminine principle can heal the wounds of patriarchal societies and lead to a more just and sustainable world. This could mean embracing qualities traditionally associated with the feminine, such as intuition, empathy, and cooperation. It could also mean recognizing the sacredness of nature and the importance of protecting the environment. By acknowledging the divine feminine, we can move beyond the limitations of a purely patriarchal worldview and embrace a more inclusive and compassionate spirituality. This shift challenges the conventional notions of power, authority, and even the very nature of God. However, even with a more balanced view, the problem of evil remains. If Yahweh is truly all-powerful and all-good, how can we explain the existence of suffering and injustice in the world? This is a question that has plagued theologians and philosophers for centuries. Have you ever struggled to reconcile the idea of a benevolent God with the harsh realities of human existence? The problem of evil challenges the very foundations of faith, leading some to question the existence of God altogether. The sheer scale of suffering in the world, from natural disasters to acts of human cruelty, can be overwhelming. How can a loving God allow such things to happen? Theologians and philosophers have offered various responses to the problem of evil. The Odyssey, for example, attempts to justify God's ways by arguing that evil is necessary for a greater good. Some argue that evil is a consequence of free will, suggesting that God allows humans to choose between good and evil, even if those choices lead to suffering. Process theology offers a different perspective, suggesting that God is not all-powerful, but is instead a persuasive force working to create order and harmony in the universe. Each explanation attempts to reconcile faith with the undeniable presence of suffering, providing intellectual frameworks for understanding what seems incomprehensible. The Old Testament itself grapples with the problem of evil. The Book of Job explores the question of why righteous people suffer, challenging the idea that suffering is always a punishment for sin. The prophecies of Isaiah offer hope for a future of peace and justice, suggesting that God will eventually triumph over evil. These texts demonstrate the evolving nature of religious thought, as ancient writers struggled to make sense of a world filled with both blessing and tragedy. Perhaps the most profound response to the problem of evil is to recognize the limitations of human understanding and to embrace the mystery of existence. We may never fully comprehend why suffering exists, but we can choose to respond with compassion, kindness, and a commitment to creating a more just world. Recognizing that our understanding is finite allows us to approach suffering with humility and empathy, seeking to alleviate pain and build a better future. This perspective offers a path towards peace, even in the face of inexplicable tragedy. But what if Yahweh himself is not a literal being, but a symbol? Consider the possibility that Yahweh is a symbol representing universal principles or archetypes rather than a literal, personal God. What if the stories and attributes associated with Yahweh are metaphors for deeper spiritual realities? Seeing Yahweh as a symbol empowers individuals to develop their own interpretations of the divine, based on their personal experiences and insights. Is Yahweh a symbol of power, authority, justice, or love? Or perhaps a combination of all these things? The answer is ultimately up to each individual to determine, based on their own spiritual journey. Symbolic interpretations can deepen one's understanding of the divine, fostering a more personal and meaningful connection with spirituality. Meditating on the symbol of Yahweh, for example, can help individuals connect with their own inner power and wisdom. By focusing on the qualities associated with Yahweh, such as strength, courage, and righteousness, individuals can cultivate these qualities within themselves. Esoteric traditions like Kabbalah and Gnosticism offer rich symbolic interpretations of Yahweh, viewing him as a representation of various spiritual realities and forces. The Kabbalah, for example, sees Yahweh as a complex and multifaceted being, represented by the 10 Sephirot, each of which embodies a different aspect of the divine. These traditions suggest that Yahweh is not simply a god to be worshipped, but a symbol to be understood and a force to be harnessed. With this understanding, viewers can see and embrace their own spiritual authority, making their own choices in accordance with their own beliefs. This invites us to explore practical applications for reclaiming spiritual power and responsibility. Building on this theme of spiritual reclamation, let's move to practical exercises for self-discovery and personal empowerment. How can we use our understanding of Yahweh as a historical figure, a cultural construct, and a symbolic representation to enhance our own spiritual growth? Start by exploring your own relationship with the divine. What does God mean to you? What qualities do you associate with the divine? Engage in practices such as meditation, journaling, or creative expression to delve deeper into these questions. These practices can help you uncover your own beliefs and values, independent of external religious doctrines. Techniques for breaking free from limiting religious beliefs involve questioning religious dogma and exploring alternative spiritual paths, leading to greater freedom and self-awareness. Analyze what resonates with you, what feels authentic and empowering, and disregard what doesn't align with your values. Consider what beliefs were imposed upon you and which ones you genuinely embrace. Recognizing the psychological and cultural factors that have shaped your religious beliefs empowers you to take responsibility for your own spiritual growth and development. This involves engaging in critical thinking, self-reflection, and open-minded exploration. These are essential tools for navigating the complexities of faith and belief, guiding you toward a more authentic and fulfilling spiritual path. In our next section, we'll discuss how this exploration can translate into practical changes in your life, fostering a sense of purpose and connection that transcends the limitations of traditional religious frameworks. The power of exploring personal spirituality then translates into our daily lives, influencing not just our inner peace, but also our interactions with the world and our place within it. Now, let's consider the evolution of Israelite rituals and practices, those very acts intended to connect with the divine. Have you ever paused to consider how the familiar rituals of modern Judaism might echo practices from long-lost pagan traditions? The Passover Seder, for instance, with its symbolic foods and retelling of the Exodus story, retains elements of ancient agricultural festivals celebrating the spring harvest. The roasted lamb, the unleavened bread, and the bitter herbs all speak to a time when human survival was intimately tied to the cycles of nature, a tradition far predating the monotheistic narrative it now serves. The Seder becomes a vessel carrying echoes of older beliefs within its contemporary form, a testament to the enduring power of cultural exchange and evolution. What does it tell us? That even the most sacred traditions bear the marks of earlier, often forgotten beliefs. Consider the practice of offering sacrifices, a ritual central to ancient Israelite worship. Originally intended to appease the gods, ensure fertility, or seek divine favor, the sacrificial system was later reinterpreted as an act of gratitude and atonement to Yahweh. But did this reinterpretation fully erase the practice's pagan roots? The burning of incense, the offering of first fruits, and the elaborate rituals surrounding animal sacrifice were all common practices in the ancient Near East, predating the rise of Israelite monotheism. These practices weren't unique to Yahweh. They were part of a shared cultural vocabulary used to communicate with the divine. The shift from appeasement to gratitude represents a subtle but significant transformation in religious thought, reflecting a move away from a transactional view of the divine to a more relational one. However, it's crucial to recognize that the underlying ritual actions, the offering of gifts, the performance of sacred acts, remained largely unchanged, revealing the enduring influence of older pagan traditions. Even the most sacred objects in Jewish worship may have pagan origins. The Ark of the Covenant, that mysterious chest said to contain the Ten Commandments, may have been inspired by similar sacred objects found in other ancient Near Eastern cultures. The portable shrines and sacred chests carried by other cultures served as focal points for divine presence and symbols of royal power. The Ark's role as a symbol of Yahweh's presence and a source of divine power mirrors these earlier traditions, suggesting a degree of cultural borrowing or adaptation. Similarly, the Temple in Jerusalem, with its elaborate architecture and intricate symbolism, may have drawn inspiration from pagan temples in the region. Recognizing these pagan roots challenges conventional interpretations of Israelite religious practices and the extent to which their rituals were original or adapted from surrounding cultures. The constant recontextualization through history gives them their unique cultural and spiritual meaning. It is in this constant transformation that we discover the origin and nature of the deity. If rituals and objects were transformed, what about the stories themselves? To understand Yahweh, we must go beyond the physical and analyze how the Old Testament, the primary source of information about him, was compiled and edited over centuries. It wasn't divinely dictated, as fundamentalists may believe. Different authors and redactors contributed their own perspectives and agendas to what you read nowadays. The biblical books are not static, monolithic texts, but evolving documents reflecting the changing beliefs and priorities of the communities that produced them. Consider the different sources that are believed to have contributed to the Pentateuch: the Yahwist, Elohist, Deuteronomist, and priestly sources, each with its own distinct style, theological emphasis, and historical perspective. The Yahwist source, for example, tends to portray Yahweh in more human terms, while the priestly source emphasizes ritual purity and the authority of the priesthood. These diverse voices create a complex and sometimes contradictory portrait of Yahweh, challenging any simplistic or dogmatic interpretation. How then has the interpretation of biblical texts shaped the understanding of Yahweh and his attributes over time? Has it been a consistent, straightforward process, or something more complex and subjective? Different Jewish and Christian traditions offer vastly different interpretations of the story of Abraham and Isaac, each reflecting its own theological perspectives. Some emphasize Abraham's unwavering faith and obedience to God, while others focus on the ethical implications of God's command to sacrifice his own son. These varying interpretations highlight the subjectivity inherent in religious interpretation, demonstrating how the same text can be used to support radically different viewpoints. What does this tell us about the nature of religious truth? Consider the passages in the Old Testament that seem to contradict the monotheistic worldview or portray Yahweh in a negative light, those uncomfortable verses that don't quite fit the image of an all-good, all-powerful God. How have religious scholars dealt with these problematic passages? Some have attempted to explain them away through elaborate allegorical interpretations, while others have argued that they reflect the limitations of human understanding. Certain passages may have been deliberately altered or suppressed to promote a particular theological or political agenda. Did certain groups suppress conflicting details or emphasize details that benefited them politically? The act of analyzing these passages offers an opportunity to confront the complexities and contradictions inherent in religious texts, fostering a more nuanced and critical approach to faith. What power dynamics were in play when these decisions were made? Critically examining the Old Testament and its historical context can empower individuals to develop a more informed and independent understanding of Yahweh. It also leads to a more personal relationship with spirituality. Instead of blindly accepting traditional interpretations, individuals can engage with the texts on their own terms, drawing their own conclusions and forming their own beliefs. This empowerment challenges the authority of religious institutions and promotes a more democratic approach to faith, where individuals are free to explore and interpret the divine in their own way. This invites a consideration of alternative views of Yahweh in contemporary spirituality. Are there ways of relating to this deity outside the confines of traditional religion? In contemporary spirituality, some pagans and Wiccans have incorporated elements of Yahweh worship into their practices, viewing him as a powerful force of nature or a symbol of masculine energy. This challenges the traditional view of Yahweh as the exclusive property of Judaism and Christianity, reclaiming him as a figure relevant to a wider range of spiritual traditions. What does it mean to see Yahweh not as a jealous God demanding exclusive worship, but as one expression of the divine among many? Some spiritual seekers use the concept of Yahweh as a metaphor for the divine spark within themselves, or for the universal consciousness that connects all things. Instead of viewing Yahweh as an external deity, they see him as a symbol of their own inner potential and the interconnectedness of all beings. This approach shifts the focus from external worship to internal transformation, aligning with mystical traditions that emphasize the direct experience of the divine. Could Yahweh, then, be a reflection of our own deepest selves? These alternative interpretations of Yahweh provide a more inclusive and empowering approach to spirituality, freeing individuals from the limitations of traditional religious dogmas. LGBTQ individuals and feminist theologians reinterpret Yahweh in ways that challenge traditional gender roles and promote greater equality and inclusivity. These reinterpretations offer a vision of Yahweh as a God who embraces diversity and celebrates the inherent worth of all beings, regardless of their gender identity, sexual orientation, or social status. What possibilities arise when we reimagine the divine in ways that reflect our own values of justice, compassion, and equality? Engaging with Yahweh as a symbolic figure, regardless of one's religious background, can foster self-discovery and a deeper connection with the divine. What aspects of Yahweh resonate with you personally? Do you connect with his strength, his justice, his compassion, or his wisdom? By exploring these questions, individuals can develop a more personal and meaningful relationship with the divine, one that transcends the boundaries of traditional religious belief. This exploration emphasizes the importance of questioning religious dogma. Questioning religious dogma and challenging established beliefs is crucial for developing a more authentic and personal connection with spirituality. Blindly accepting religious teachings without critical examination can lead to intellectual stagnation, emotional repression, and social alienation. It can also prevent individuals from developing their own moral compass and making informed decisions about their lives. What are the potential consequences of surrendering one's own critical thinking to religious authority? Breaking free from limiting religious beliefs requires engaging in critical thinking, exploring alternative spiritual paths, and developing a personal code of ethics based on one's own values and experiences. What steps can you take to reclaim your own spiritual authority? Meditation, mindfulness, and self-reflection can help individuals become more aware of their own thoughts and emotions, empowering them to make more conscious choices about their beliefs and actions. By paying attention to their inner experiences, individuals can identify limiting beliefs and challenge their validity, replacing them with more empowering and life-affirming perspectives. Recognizing the psychological and cultural factors that have shaped religious beliefs empowers individuals to take responsibility for their own spiritual growth and development. This involves acknowledging the influence of family, community, and cultural norms on one's beliefs, and then consciously choosing which beliefs to embrace and which to discard. This level of self-awareness promotes a more autonomous and fulfilling spiritual journey. Cultivating a spirit of open-minded inquiry and intellectual humility is essential for navigating the complexities of faith and belief. Acknowledging the limits of human understanding and embracing the mystery of existence allows for a more compassionate and nuanced approach to faith. How can we embrace the unknown without sacrificing our intellectual integrity? By remaining open to new perspectives and challenging our own assumptions, we can continue to grow and evolve spiritually, fostering a more inclusive and enriching understanding of the divine. All of this invites us to speculate on the future of Yahweh. As humanity grapples with new challenges and opportunities, the concept of Yahweh may continue to evolve. The rise of science and technology, the increasing awareness of global interconnectedness, and the growing emphasis on social justice may all influence how people understand and relate to this ancient deity. Will Yahweh remain a symbol of division and conflict, Or can he become a source of unity and reconciliation? By embracing a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of Yahweh, humanity can move beyond the divisions and conflicts of the past and create a more harmonious and sustainable future. Can Yahweh become a bridge between different religious and cultural traditions, fostering a shared commitment to peace, justice, and environmental stewardship? Perhaps Yahweh could become a symbol of unity and reconciliation, bringing together people from different religious and cultural backgrounds in a shared pursuit of peace, justice, and spiritual growth. In this vision, Yahweh transcends the boundaries of any particular religion or culture, becoming a universal symbol of the divine that resonates with people from all walks of life. Will the future see Yahweh as a symbol of shared humanity rather than a source of division? The future of Yahweh depends on personal responsibility, critical thinking, and open-minded exploration in shaping the future of religion and spirituality. It calls for an active role in creating a more compassionate and enlightened world. And it is that enlightened worldview that we will embrace next. That enlightened worldview demands we investigate the psychology of belief. What are the fundamental human needs that drive individuals to embrace faith, and how do these needs shape the very nature of their belief in a deity like Yahweh? Human beings possess an intrinsic need for security, belonging, and purpose, needs that often find fulfillment in the embrace of a powerful, protective divine figure. The human heart yearns for reassurance in the face of existential anxieties. Consider the allure of divine protection and the promise of eternal life. These concepts offer solace, alleviating the fear of death and the uncertainties that plague mortal existence. Yahweh, in this context, becomes a shield against the unknown, a source of unwavering support in a chaotic world. It is easy to understand why a human being builds his life around that protective figure. Furthermore, fantasy and wish fulfillment play a pivotal role in shaping our religious beliefs. The desire for justice, order, and a benevolent authority figure fuels the construction of divine narratives. Yahweh, as a just and all-powerful judge, appeals to those who have suffered injustice or oppression. The promise of a final reckoning, where the wicked are punished and the righteous are rewarded, offers a sense of hope and vindication. In a world often perceived as unfair, the concept of a divinely ordained cosmic balance provides comfort and a reason to persevere. The all-seeing eye that will punish the wicked is the perfect belief to help overcome daily injustice, and that is the appealing power of the narrative. Beyond individual needs, belonging to a religious community and sharing a common belief system provides vital social support and a sense of identity. Participation in religious rituals and ceremonies strengthens social bonds, reinforcing shared values and creating a sense of collective purpose. The shared stories, traditions, and practices of a religious community offer a framework for understanding the world and one's place within it. This sense of belonging provides individuals with a network of support, offering comfort, guidance, and assistance during times of need. That collective reinforces the power of belief and minimizes the external opposing views. However, recognizing these psychological underpinnings doesn't invalidate belief. Rather, it provides invaluable insight into its power and its potential for both good and ill. Understanding the needs and desires that shape our religious beliefs lays the foundation for critically examining religious narratives, empowering individuals to engage with faith in a more conscious and discerning manner. This is a more nuanced path that helps to understand the power and needs behind faith and beliefs, but this path requires investigating a darker side. Religious institutions have historically wielded the concept of Yahweh and other deities as a tool to control and manipulate populations, consolidating power through fear, guilt, and promises of divine favor. The image of a caring figure can be insidiously transformed into an instrument of control. The threat of divine punishment, hell, damnation has long been used to enforce obedience and conformity, suppressing dissent and maintaining the status quo. By instilling fear of divine retribution, religious authorities have been able to dictate behavior, control thought, and extract resources from their followers. Is fearing a deity the best path to find it? Throughout history, we observe specific mechanisms of religious control, such as the suppression of dissenting voices, the manipulation of sacred texts, and the promotion of unquestioning obedience. The Catholic Church, during the Inquisition, ruthlessly silenced those deemed heretics, using torture and execution to maintain its authority and suppress alternative interpretations of Christian doctrine. Similarly, throughout history, the interpretation of sacred texts has been carefully controlled to support the prevailing power structure. How can you embrace a figure if you are just allowed to see one limited perspective? Moreover, the economic dimensions of religious power cannot be ignored. Religious institutions have often amassed vast wealth and influence through tithes, donations, and land ownership. The Vatican, with its extensive real estate holdings, priceless art collections, and global investments, stands as a stark example of the economic power that religious institutions can accumulate. This wealth allows them to exert influence over political affairs, control access to resources, and perpetuate their own power and privilege. This solidifies the institution and empowers control over the narrative and the crowds. Understanding these dynamics of religious control empowers individuals to critically evaluate religious claims and resist manipulation. Recognizing how the masses can be controlled through beliefs in divine power allows for a more informed and independent approach to faith. Only through that open view will a personal connection be achieved. That more personal connection begins with the understanding that individual experiences, emotions, and beliefs shape one's understanding of Yahweh, shifting the perspective inward. Someone who has experienced profound trauma may view Yahweh as a source of healing and comfort, a compassionate presence offering solace in times of despair. The divine becomes a refuge, a symbol of hope and resilience in the face of suffering. Others find strength through different narratives and figures. Furthermore, different personality types, cognitive styles, and cultural backgrounds influence how people relate to the divine. Someone with a more analytical mind may approach Yahweh through rigorous theological study, dissecting biblical texts, and engaging in intellectual debates about the nature of God. Someone with a more intuitive mind may connect through prayer, meditation, or mystical experiences, seeking a direct and personal encounter with the divine. Does a real connection come from studying, feeling, or both? Indeed, the concept of Yahweh often serves as a projection of one's own inner self, reflecting both positive and negative qualities. Someone struggling with anger may project this anger onto Yahweh, viewing him as a wrathful and vengeful God, while someone who is filled with love and compassion may see Yahweh as a benevolent and forgiving presence. That God is nothing more than the reflection of one's own spirit and emotions. Cultivating self-awareness and emotional intelligence can lead to a more authentic and fulfilling relationship with the divine, one based on self-knowledge and personal experience rather than blind adherence to dogma. By understanding our own inner landscape, we can begin to see Yahweh not as an external authority figure, but as a reflection of our own potential for goodness, compassion, and wisdom. This is one possible path of knowledge. However, we must be cautious of spiritual bypassing. It's easy to use spiritual beliefs, including concepts of Yahweh, to avoid dealing with personal issues and emotional wounds. Prayer or religious rituals can become a means of numbing feelings of grief or anxiety, rather than confronting them directly. This only delays one's path and doesn't solve real issues. Such spiritual bypassing can manifest in religious contexts, justifying harmful behaviors or denying the reality of suffering. Some religious individuals may use their faith to justify discrimination or violence against others, claiming that their actions are divinely ordained or that their victims are somehow deserving of their fate. Others may deny the reality of suffering, claiming that it is all part of God's plan or that it is a test of faith. This manipulation is seen throughout history in all types of religious beliefs. The consequences of spiritual bypassing can be dire, leading to emotional repression, stunted personal growth, and unhealthy relationships. Someone who is engaging in spiritual bypassing may become isolated from others, develop a distorted view of reality, or perpetuate cycles of abuse and trauma. This detachment is harmful to the individual and the community. Integrating spirituality with psychological healing and emotional well-being is essential for ensuring a balanced approach to personal growth. Seeking therapy, practicing mindfulness, and engaging in self-reflection can help individuals confront their emotional wounds, develop healthy coping mechanisms, and cultivate genuine self-compassion. Those steps help to understand the real and the spiritual world. Finally, remember to embrace the mystery and uncertainty of existence, acknowledging the limits of human understanding. The concept of Yahweh can be seen as a symbol of the unknowable and unnameable source of all creation, the ultimate mystery that lies beyond human comprehension. Accepting this truth helps bring inner peace. Acknowledging the limits of human knowledge fosters humility, compassion, and a greater appreciation for the diversity of human experience. Recognizing that no one has a monopoly on truth leads to greater tolerance and understanding between people of different faiths and beliefs, promoting peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. Is that the final transformation of Yahweh? Ultimately, finding solace and meaning in the unknown leads to a deeper sense of connection with the divine and with the universe as a whole, moving beyond the need for certainty and control. Embracing the mystery of existence cultivates a profound sense of awe and wonder, fostering a deeper appreciation for the beauty and complexity of the world. Therefore, find your own path to spirituality, one based on your personal experiences, values, and insights, free from dogma and fear. Promote critical thinking, embrace self-discovery, and fearlessly explore the depths of your own being. That personal transformation will define your Yahweh, but that can also be said of any other figure, belief, or religion. But the exploration of a personal transformation demands a critical eye on the very texts that shaped our understanding of Yahweh, for the scriptures themselves are not neutral vessels, but rather products of human hands and agendas. How much of what we believe about Yahweh is a reflection of divine truth, and how much is a carefully constructed narrative designed to serve specific interests? The Old Testament, the foundation upon which much of our understanding of Yahweh rests, was not written in a vacuum. It was compiled and edited over centuries by individuals with their own perspectives, biases, and political motivations. The very act of selecting which stories to include, which details to emphasize, and which interpretations to promote inevitably shaped the portrayal of Yahweh and his relationship with humanity. Consider the Deuteronomistic history, a significant portion of the Old Testament that includes the books of Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. This historical narrative, written during the reign of King Josiah in the 7th century BCE, had a clear agenda: to promote monolatry, the worship of Yahweh alone, and to centralize that worship in Jerusalem. Every story, every law, every prophecy within this history was carefully crafted to support this goal, often at the expense of historical accuracy or alternative religious perspectives. Were the events tailored to strengthen a specific narrative, or were they recorded as impartial truths? Delving into the Old Testament exposes instances where the text appears to have been deliberately manipulated to downplay or erase the influence of other deities, or to paint Yahweh in a more favorable light. Accounts of the Israelite conquest of Canaan, for example, often portray a swift and decisive victory, with Yahweh leading his chosen people to claim their divinely ordained land. However, archaeological evidence suggests a much more gradual and complex process of settlement and assimilation, with the Israelites coexisting and intermingling with the Canaanite population for centuries. The biblical narrative seems to have been exaggerated and idealized to justify the Israelites' claim to the land and to demonize the Canaanite deities who were worshipped there, masking the cultural appropriation. Did the victors rewrite the history to solidify their power, or was there a more complex and nuanced exchange between the cultures? By understanding the textual biases inherent in the Old Testament, individuals can critically evaluate religious claims and recognize the human element in these sacred texts. Recognizing that the Old Testament was not divinely dictated, but rather a product of human authorship, opens the door to a more nuanced and historically accurate understanding of ancient Israelite religion. This deconstruction of Yahweh as an impartial judge highlights the human element in the construction of religious narratives, paving the way for a more personal and empowering relationship with the divine. But the bias isn't limited to the sidelining of other gods. The very structure of the Old Testament, its focus on patriarchal figures and narratives, reveals another significant suppression. The suppression of the divine feminine. While Yahweh is presented as the supreme, all-powerful God, the presence of goddesses, particularly Asherah, Yahweh's consort in some early Israelite traditions, is often downplayed or demonized. What forces conspired to erase the feminine from the divine equation? Archaeological findings reveal inscriptions and figurines depicting Asherah alongside Yahweh, suggesting that her worship was once widespread in ancient Israel. Inscriptions found at Kuntalit Adrad, for example, refer to Yahweh and his Asherah, indicating that the two deities were worshipped together as a divine couple. These findings challenge the traditional view of early Israelite religion as purely monotheistic, suggesting that it may have incorporated elements of Canaanite paganism, including the worship of a goddess alongside Yahweh. So why was she removed? The reasons behind the suppression of the divine feminine in ancient Israel are complex and multifaceted, but they likely stem from a combination of patriarchal social structures and a desire to establish a clear distinction between Israelite religion and Canaanite paganism. As ancient Israelite society became increasingly patriarchal, the worship of goddesses like Asherah may have been seen as a threat to male dominance and social order. The prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel condemned the worship of Asherah and other goddesses, portraying them as symbols of idolatry and moral corruption, further marginalizing the divine feminine. What was feared about feminine power that it needed to be demonized and erased? The consequences of suppressing the divine feminine are far-reaching, contributing to a patriarchal worldview, a devaluation of women, and a disconnection from nature. The marginalization of women in ancient Israelite society can be seen as a direct result of the suppression of the divine feminine, with women being relegated to subordinate roles and denied equal rights and opportunities. The association of nature with chaos and disorder, as opposed to the order and control associated with the male god Yahweh, further reinforces this imbalance. The patriarchal worldview that emerged from this suppression has had a lasting impact on Western civilization, shaping attitudes towards gender, nature, and spirituality for centuries. How different would our world be if the divine feminine had been honored and integrated into our religious and cultural traditions? Reclaiming the divine feminine can lead to a more balanced and holistic understanding of the divine, with a greater appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things. Recognizing the importance of both masculine and feminine energies within the divine can foster a more inclusive and equitable society, one where women are valued and empowered, and where nature is respected and protected. Could integrating the divine feminine be a path toward greater harmony and balance, both within ourselves and in the world around us? The figure of Yahweh does not exist in isolation. Comparing him to other storm gods from different cultures, like Zeus from Greek mythology, Thor from Norse mythology, and Baal from Canaanite religion, reveals striking similarities in their attributes, roles, and mythologies. Are these shared characteristics mere coincidence, or do they point to a deeper, universal human fascination with the forces of nature and the divine? Yahweh, Zeus, Thor, and Baal are all associated with thunder, lightning, and the power to control the weather. Zeus wields the thunderbolt, Thor possesses the hammer Mjolnir, and Baal commands the storm clouds. These deities represent the raw power and unpredictability of nature, embodying both its destructive and life-giving potential. All these gods, including Yahweh, appear during transformative periods when societies needed to conquer or endure nature's lashings. These storm gods often represent the power of kingship and the struggle against chaos and evil. Zeus's battle against the Titans, Thor's battles against the giants, and Baal's battle against Yam, the god of the sea, all symbolize the triumph of order over chaos, reinforcing the authority of the ruling elite and ensuring the stability of society. Yahweh's battles against the enemies of Israel serve a similar function, reinforcing the Israelites' sense of national identity and their belief in their divinely ordained destiny. How much of their appeal was tied to societal needs for order and control. The commonalities between these storm gods suggest a universal human fascination with the power and unpredictability of nature, and a desire to find meaning and order in the world. Across cultures and throughout history, people have sought to understand and control the forces of nature by personifying them as deities. This human drive toward understanding and control is the source of many gods. But is Yahweh a truly unique and exceptional deity, or simply one manifestation of a recurring archetype? Questioning the notion of divine uniqueness can open up new avenues for understanding the nature of faith and the human relationship with the divine, as all human cultures share similar needs that they try to overcome. Furthermore, as societies evolved, so did the very concept of morality. Tracing the evolution of morality in the Old Testament reveals a shift from a system of tribal laws and customs to a more universal code of ethics. How did the ancient Israelites' understanding of right and wrong transform over time, and what can this tell us about the nature of morality itself? The harsh laws of the Book of Exodus, with their emphasis on retribution and strict adherence to ritual purity, stand in stark contrast to the more compassionate teachings of the prophets, who condemned social injustice and called for a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources. The concept of justice evolved from a system of retribution and revenge to a more nuanced understanding of fairness, forgiveness, and compassion. The prophets Amos and Micah condemned social injustice and called for a more equitable distribution of wealth and resources, emphasizing the importance of caring for the poor and vulnerable. Did morality originate from divine decree, or did it arise from the evolving needs and values of human society? The Old Testament's ethical teachings have profoundly influenced Western civilization, inspiring movements for social justice and human rights. The concept of the Sabbath as a day of rest has influenced labor laws and the recognition of workers' rights, while the prophets' calls for social justice have inspired countless activists and reformers. Even the Golden Rule has shaped ethics and morality. But to what extent do Yahweh's commands reflect universal moral principles, and to what extent do they reflect the specific values and interests of the ancient Israelites? Critically examining religious ethics can empower individuals to develop their own moral compass, one guided by reason, compassion, and a commitment to justice. One cannot accept ancient values as absolute truths. What happens when these values conflict with modern sensibilities? Ultimately, the enduring power of myth lies not in its literal truth, but in its ability to provide meaning, purpose, and identity. The story of the Exodus, for example, has served as a source of hope and inspiration for oppressed people throughout history, regardless of their religious background or beliefs. The story of Yahweh has been reinterpreted and reimagined in countless different contexts, reflecting the changing needs and values of different generations. Feminist theologians have reinterpreted the story of Yahweh in ways that challenge patriarchal assumptions and promote greater equality and inclusivity, while liberation theologians have emphasized Yahweh's concern for the poor and marginalized, using the biblical narrative to advocate for social justice. How can we find our own meaning and purpose in the story of Yahweh, regardless of our religious background or beliefs? Let us remember that it is a narrative above all else, and narratives can be rewritten and reinterpreted. As the next section shows, that power relies in your hands. Let us remember that it is a narrative above all else, and narratives can be rewritten and reinterpreted. That power relies in your hands. The journey we've undertaken has revealed Yahweh's transformation from a tribal warrior god to a universal deity, a journey shaped by the confluence of Canaanite religious influences, the crucible of the Babylonian exile, and the strategic hand of religious leaders molding his image. Syncretism, the blending of different beliefs, cultural appropriation, the adoption of elements from other cultures, and the projection of human values onto the divine have been the key dynamics in this grand transformation of cultural consciousness. Yahweh's story is not a singular event, but a mosaic of borrowed and adapted traditions, mirroring the long-standing cultural influences of Mesopotamian and various pagan traditions. From the stories we tell to the characteristics we celebrate, the evolution of Yahweh mirrors the evolving nature of those who worship him. It is the psychological elements of our interpretation of these stories, after all, that ultimately construct our mental image of Yahweh. These patterns of religious syncretism, cultural appropriation, and the projection of human values onto divine figures underscore a vital truth. These mechanisms are not unique to Yahweh, but reverberate throughout the corridors of religious history. Other traditions bear similar marks of adaptation, influence, and the persistent human endeavor to shape the divine in our image, showcasing not isolated events, but common threads weaving through the tapestry of human spirituality. The ability to recognize these patterns isn't an exercise in dismissal, but an invitation to spiritual reclamation, empowering us to critically examine our beliefs and cultivate a personal connection with the divine. To remember that God is not an external decree, but a personal journey, a voyage of self-exploration, and a divine attribute that each of us can cultivate individually, free from inherited doctrines. Understanding the origins of Yahweh holds profound implications for our understanding of religion and spirituality in general, challenging conventional notions of monotheism, religious authority, and the very nature of faith. By recognizing the human element interwoven within religious narratives, we foster greater tolerance, empathy, and understanding between people of diverse faiths and beliefs. Acknowledging the common roots and shared experiences that underpin different religious traditions enables us to transcend division and conflict, fostering a more harmonious and compassionate world. But this cannot happen if we don't embrace this shared influence in an open and honest way. The value of critical thinking, open-minded inquiry, and self-reflection are the tools by which we navigate the complexities of faith and belief, allowing us to question our own assumptions and biases, and to embrace the richness of alternative perspectives. Perhaps true spirituality isn't found in blindly accepting dogma, but in embarking on a lifelong journey of self-discovery and personal growth, a continuous and evolving faith that adapts and deepens with each new experience. In the beginning of this journey, we asked, who was Yahweh before he became the God of the Israelites? And how did a tribal deity evolve into a universal God? Yahweh was originally a tribal warrior storm god, a deity of the mountains and deserts, who gradually absorbed attributes and characteristics from other deities and cultural traditions, evolving into a symbol of universal power and authority. The resolution to the narrative tension, the key to understanding Yahweh's journey, lies not in a definitive answer, but in affirming the value of the exploration itself. While the mystery surrounding Yahweh may never be fully unraveled, the act of questioning and exploring remains a valuable and transformative experience. Understanding Yahweh's past isn't about disproving or discrediting anyone's faith. Instead, it's about reclaiming authority over one's own spiritual path. It is of value to understand how humans have shaped the divine to consolidate power and create meaning to the universe, seeing the divine narrative as a reflection of who we are. The journey doesn't end here. Avenues for further exploration beckon, inviting you to study other ancient Near Eastern religions, delve into esoteric interpretations of Yahweh, or engage in interfaith dialogue. Delve deeper into the topics that resonated most profoundly with you and share your insights and discoveries with others. I invite you to continue questioning, exploring, and reimagining the concept of Yahweh in your own life, based on your personal experiences, values, and insights. Develop spiritual practices and rituals that resonate with your deepest self, free from the constraints of dogma and fear. The enduring power of myth lies in its ability to provide meaning and purpose in the narratives that shape our lives. Embrace the unknown, for it is in the realm of the unexplored that true understanding begins. I invite you to join a community of like-minded seekers and continue the conversation online, fostering a sense of connection and shared exploration. Be sure to join us next time, when we will be exploring the comparative mythology of ancient deities and practical spiritual exercises for personal